Welcome to everybody. I'm Fulvio Braido. I'm the current president of Inter Asthma Global Asthma Association. I'm happy you have joined us for this webinar. Today we are covering a really hot topic because all the parts of the world are facing with the climate change. I'm proud to introduce Professor Guillermo Guidos Fogelbach from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional in Mexico City. He will cover this topic and especially the impact of climate change on asthma. That is the disease that we are covering in the context of our society and journal. Please, Guillermo, the podium is for you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Professor Braido and steering committee from Global Asthma Association for this invitation. It's an honor for me to stay here today. Today, we're talking about the impact of climate change on asthma. This is the most important thing in the last decade. Everyone talking about the climate change and impact on several respiratory illness and the humankind and the other on the other lives in the earth. When we're talking about the climate change, we're talking about the different ways to the pollutants and the climate affect the life in the earth. Climate change is characterized as any change composition of the global atmosphere or regional climate pattern that adds to the natural variability of the climate observed over the time. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen right now? Okay, what happened with that? Sorry about that. Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, it's okay. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. And this is my disclosure. But when we're talking about the climate change and the impact of the respiratory health, we need to know something about the history. This is not new for the humankind. The Earth climate is constantly changing and variable over the time. For example, in Los Angeles in 1903, a lot of people confused the cloud of the pollutant over the city in the Los Angeles city and mistaken for the eclipse. And everyone say, oh, today have a total eclipse of the sun because we can see the sun right now, but it's not eclipsed. It's like a fog in the pollutant fog in the Los Angeles city. After that, in 1943, a lot of people have symptoms in the respiratory system and eyes and throat burning like a gas attack. And some people entering a panic because say maybe it's attack from in this time the World War II is coming in near the United States and Europe, and some people say maybe Japanese attack Los Angeles because we have symptom, respiratory symptom. But no, the real is the contamination, the pollutant in the air is the causes of these symptoms. After that, in December in 1952, several people from United Kingdom, at least 4,000 people dead with the relation with pollutants, and this called the gray smoke in 1952. After that, we have several cases in Beijing in the last decades. A lot of people has symptoms on the respiratory system and all implication with the health in the population in Beijing. But it's not just Beijing in China. All people around the world has implication with pollutants. We have a lot of number of publications related to air pollution and human health. We can see in this table the raise in the last 20 years about the publication in PubMed and websites. Climate change is one of the main concerns of the humankind due to the social and economic impact on the population. Actually, there is an evidence that indicate an increase in the prevalence of some diseases such as allergic, respiratory, digestive, and multiply organic failure about a relation with the pollutants and the interaction between genetic potential and environmental. Climate change and air pollution are closely related right now. When we're talking about the climate change, some people relate with the temperature and increased the temperature in the last century, but this is not new. Earth climate is dependent on incoming solar radiation, outgoing thermal radiation, and the composition of the Earth atmosphere. And we have a different situation in the last centuries. For example, in this modeling, some researchers show what is the climate in the early 9th century, and we can see in the blue one the temperature is around 2.5 degrees below right now, and in 2006 we can see in yellow what is the increase of the temperature in the last century. And this is the dramatical chart. What is the temperature increases every 5 years. Some of them papers relation with the increase of the temperature in the last decade for different factors. But the most important factor maybe is by the human activities. The central estimate says about 2.5 Celsius increase in the last decade, and some researchers talking about the increase in the temperature about the 5.8 centigrades by the 2100 years. This is so alarming for the humankind. Some of us saw that photos about 5 or 10 years before, when we saw a polar bear in the iceberg, and melting iceberg is a dramatical photos at this moment. Most of the reason of these dramatical photos may be related with the pollutants and the climate change. But the polar bear might not be the only threatened species affected by the pollutants and the climate change. The human has a different change in the health and the ecosystem for these changes. For example, temperature extreme has related with more death and medical visit for cardiovascular, kidney, and respiratory disorder. Air pollutant, in the other hands, are related with exposure to particulate matter and ozone increases hospitalization and death for respiratory disease like asthma. Allergens and pollens are involved in too, because pollen and lower growing season mean more pollen and increasing allergy rates. Air pollution can be defined as the presence in the air of substance harmful to human and is associated with a high risk for respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurological illness. The composition of air pollution is so complex and is too dynamic. It changes from season to season and influenced by human activity and meteorological events. It's so important to distinguish between what is meant by the term the weather and climate. Although weather conditions refer to day-to-day fluctuation in temperature and precipitation, and on the other hand, climate change refers to change in long-term average of daily weather for extended periods of time. Outdoor air pollutants are included primary pollutants and secondary pollutants. We're talking about in a few minutes. All these contexts appear the relation between them, and we have a social behavior context like age, gender, race, ethnicity, poverty has relation with the pollutants, and also this behavior affect the health condition of this population. For example, environmental institutional context like geography, agriculture production, or livestock use affect directly to the health outcomes, exposure pathway, and climate drivers. Increasing the number of death and acute morbidity due to health waves are so relation at this moment. This increases frequency of cardiorespiratory events due to the higher concentration of ground level of ozone, and also these changes affect the frequency of respiratory disease from transborder long-range air pollutants, but also alter the spatial and temporal distribution of allergen and some infection disease vector. When a few years ago, at the beginning of the 2000, some researchers talking about the relation between climate change and death, and World Health Organization present this chart with in this chart we can see the mortality per million the people relating with the pollutants are from 2 to 120 people per year in different countries. For example, in Europe and United States, they have at this moment the lower mortality directly related by pollutants and climate change. But in the other part of the earth, like Africa and Latin America and some part of Asia, they have a different history because the 70 to 120 people dead every year related by the pollutants. And some people say, but it's lower, is 100 people, is it doesn't mean nothing. But it's not correct because this statistical is from 2000. Actually, some researchers talking about 4 or 5 times up for this statistical at this moment. The severity and duration of the summertime reunion regional for pollution are projected to increase in the next 20 or 50 years. We have a different environmental condition, like a social condition, health system condition, has a direct impact on the health for the respiratory and other diseases. And also, this impact has a social economic disruption for different part of the population of this earth, and all of them are related with the climate change. Climate change has different impact related with the term of the exposure. For example, when the people has exposure from hours to day, maybe the major symptom to present is asthma, increase in the asthma attack, COPD attack, bronchiectasia attacks, and upper airway infection. All of them are relation with the increase to the acute medical care and has more episodes every month. But when the people has a long-term exposure, we can see a different history. For example, in decrease of the lung function, increase asthma and COPD, increase mortality, increase lung cancer development, and in the recent year, some publication talking about the increase of the severity of pneumonia and death related with the COVID-19. But not just COVID-19, other virus like a rhinovirus and syncytial respiratory virus are related with the pollutants in different regions. Air pollution describes a wide variety of the airborne material. Pollution as well consists of material including dust, smoke, and soot that directly emitted to the air or result from the transformation or gaseous pollutant. These particles come from natural sources, for example, volcanoes, wildfires, but the major causes is the human activities, such as burning fossil fuels, incinerating waste, and smelting metals. We have a different sources of pollutant right now. The most important is the mobile sources, like cars, trucks, buses, and wherever. These mobile sources increase the particulate matter in the atmosphere, volatile organic compounds, and NOx. But we have a different sources after that. For example, stationary sources related with the power plants and factories, natural sources like a volcano's eruption, forest fire, and all of them related with the increase in the particulate matter in the atmosphere every year. Climate change and air pollution have to a large extent and common causes to the emission from fossil fuel burning and related to with the greenhouse gases as methane and nitrous oxide. When we're talking about the combustion of the fossil fuel and emission and increased emission for heavy metals like lead, like chromium, all of them are related with the increase of the temperature, a direct effect to the air pollutant, in particular ozone formation. Remember, a few years ago, like 10 years ago, APA modify those criteria about the pollutants, and there can determine it to be harmful to the public health and environmental directly pollutants. The most important pollutant determined for this criteria are particulate matters, ozone, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and carbon monoxide. More of these pollutants are inhalable like a fine particles, such as those found in smoke and hazes. This particle has different diameters. And what is the importance of these diameters? In these cases, sizes matter. Size is important to behavior to particulate matter in the atmosphere and human body, and determines the entry and absorption for potential for particles in the lungs. For example, particles larger than 10 micrometers are trapped in the nose and throat and never reach the lung, for the size is so large for reach the lungs. But therefore, particles than 10 micrometers in diameter or less are the most concerned for their effect on human health. Particles between 5 to 10 micrometers are removed by physical process like a cough, like a sneezing. And this particle, when they are smaller than 5 micrometers, reach the bronchial tubes, and the particles to 2.5 micrometers in diameters or smaller are breathable in the deepest portion of the lungs. In this photo, we can see the particulate matters in the alveolus. When we compare, or we can try to imagine what are the sizes of this particle, we have, this is a traditional scheme for the human hair, and we can translate the diameter for the particles. This is a particulate matter 10 micrometers. We compare the human hair diameters, and when we try to compare 2.5, this is in the red appear over the 10.5 micrometers diameters. For example, when we compare with the fine beach sand, this is a small sand, we could try to compare. This is a sand, this is a human hair, and this is the particulate matters. This particulate matter can reach different part of the respiratory tract. For example, fine particulate inhalable from the street, dust, and abrasion can reach the main bronchioles, but the fine particulate respiratory matter from industrial dust, exhaust, increase or are related with increase the lung cancer, because this particle affect and reach the small diameter in the bronchiole. And ultrafine particle like a diesel exhaust increase the risk of the heart attack and increase the risk of cancer in different part of the body. What is the adverse health effect linked to particulate matter? We have a different effect directly to the human health, but the most important maybe is a lung cancer, increase the lung cancer prevalence, exacerbation of COPD, development of chronic lung diseases, increases the heart attack incidence, increase the hospital admission and emergency room visit for heart and lung diseases, but also increase the premature death, low birth weight, return birth, and decrease lung function along the time. What is the immunological mechanism related with particulate matter? At this time, some researchers talking and investigate about the immunological effect directly in the human immunity system. For example, particulate matter are related with increases to interleukin 1, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, interleukin 33, TSLP, interleukin 25. This is just in the epithelial cells. For example, in macrophage are increased the carbon loading and the effective clearance, and decrease the phagocytosis. In the case of the monocytes, increase in TNF alpha and HR. In the dendritic cell, we can see increases in CD80 and 86, increases the interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, and interleukin 23, all of them related with inflammation. And also in other immunity cells like eosinophils, neutrophil, and mast cell also shows the particulate matter increases the migration to epithelium following to the exposure. On the other hand, in the adaptive system, we can see increases in interleukin 5, interleukin 13, increase interleukin from Th17, and has imbalance between Th1 and Th2 and Th17. In this cell, we can see increases for IgE and AGA. But also, particulate matters are related with increases of ROS with direct implication in damage of mitochondria, increases inflammatory response, and all of them related with increases of inflammation. The other major compound for the pollutant are nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide are from the emission from cars, trucks, and buses, and also power plants. For example, right now in Europe, some countries like Germany and Spain are increases burning the fossil fuel for heating. All of them are related with the reactivity gases, knows actually like oxide of nitrogen and nitrogen oxides. Although some of natural sources are from the burning fuels. But in these cases, NOx have direct effect on the human health effect. For example, some people has a burning eyes with respiratory irritation, like a patient we have previous diagnosis from edema, emphysema, asthma, increase the attack of asthma, decrease the compliance, increase the pulmonary inflammation, increase the cardiovascular disease, increase the risk of the heart attack. But when the people exposed directly to the NOx, some people present breathing difficulty, causing wheezing and nose and throat irritation. But NOx not only affect the airway, but also affect the skin. For example, NOxes are related with aging, atopic sensitization, melanogenesis, and erythema. In the people we suffer with the allergies, increases the allergy disease and neutrophil inflammation. In the other hand, other compounds related with the pollutants are sulfur oxides. The largest sources of sulfur oxides in the atmosphere is the burning and fossil fuels emitted by power plants and other industrial facilities. A smaller source of the sulfur oxides emission includes industrial processes such as extracting metal, natural sources such as volcano eruption, and the use of the diesel. Sulfur oxide concentration can be related with the plant's damage and decreased growth and can contribute with the challenge in pollen composition. Remember, when we're talking about this pollutant, is not just affect the human health, and also affect the other lives in the planet. Even the dose, like sulfur oxides exposure, is associated with a decline in the lung function, majorly in FB1 and FBC among the general population. The major compounds implied in the affecting the human respiratory system is the ozone. Ozone, remember the ozone is the secondary pollutant generated through the chemical reaction between oxides or nitrogen and volatile organic compounds. All of them released by natural sources or following from anthropogenic activities. And when these compounds has presence of the sunlight, has a changes in this composition and has direct effect in the inflammation. For example, ozone has related with the irritation in the lungs and made people more vulnerable to the effect to the small particles and allergens. Ozone has different effects, like induce a deterioration of lung function, increase airway inflammation, increase risk of asthma exacerbation, increase epithelial cell permeability, increase intracellular reactive oxide species, oxygen species, and decrease mucociliary clearance. We have a different pathway involved with ozone. For example, increase some interleukins like interleukin 1, also interleukin 6, affect directly epithelial cell alveolar type 2, affect affect directly the glucocorticoid pathway and also affect the nuclear factors. For these cases, ozone are related with the increase of the lung cancer and different cancer in the airways. In the last century, we can see a different raises in the ozone concentration. For example, in the last 30 years in the United States, we can see increases for 2 or 3 folds from 1996 to 1999. In 3 years, we can find 3 more times ozone concentration in all the cities. These increases are related with increases the hospital admission and also mortalities. In general, when we're talking about the air pollution and toxic particles and gases, what is the effect in the human health? For example, this pollutant increases the recruitment and activation of the inflammation cell, generate and array inflammation mediators, increase sensitization to allergens, are related to with depletion of protective antioxidant on their enzymes, and has different effect in different aging. For example, are related with the interference in the placental barrier, with the environmental air pollutants, and when we add epigenetic modification, we have direct impliance in the newborns. But also in the old population are related with the respiratory disorder, renal disorder, hepatic disorder, and also cancer. Particulate matter increase the susceptibility to some virus like COVID-19 and influenza virus and rhinovirus in the youngest population. Some symptoms is not just in the respiratory system, and also this pollutant affect physiological stress lifestyle. We can see increases to the exposure to the new allergens, but also in indoor environmental affect the life changes, like a new pattern of sensitization for molds, fungi spores, and pollen too. We have a global issues related with the pollutants and climate change. For example, increased susceptibility to respiratory infection, reduce lung function, increase the exacerbation of COPD, airway remodeling, increase the infection for respiratory virus and bacteria too. It's so important to us understand the climate change is not a myth, actually is the most important issues we have like a humankind, because affect water resources, affect mental health, affect aeroallergens, waterborne diseases, and other. All of them has direct implication with the temperature, exposure to pollen, sensitization to allergens, incidence or increased incidence of asthma and allergies. And for this reason, it's important to the government authorities change the political, environmental, and regulation for this, because affect different population. For example, older population or older people has increases the mortality related with the respiratory health and cardiovascular illness too. In the last decade, we can see increases the population in the extreme of the life. Elderly and youngest population increases the visit of the emergency room related with the effect directly to the climate change and pollutants. For this reason, it's important to know the climate change affect every part of the population, and related with the increase with the other health impliance. For example, in indoors environmental, increase the fungi, exposure to allergens. Some of them are related with the respiratory infection, and decreased lung function related with the NOx and exposure to ozone. In conclusion, we need to know the pollutants affect every part of our lifestyle and need to take a part of this problem activity, and maybe if we have the opportunity to change these policies, is the better for the world. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Guillermo Guidos, for providing us this really interesting overview of this hot topic. It is clear that several issues of our life are affected by climate change, and it is clear that as a scientific community, we have to study this phenomenon and to prepare ourselves in order to provide an updated, better assistance to our patients. I really enjoyed one of your slides. You have summarized that we have to consider that it is clear that we have an increase of pollution. It is clear that at the indoor level, we have some changes, especially also changes in our lifestyle. It is clear that we will face with the new allergens, and we have a new exposure to different kind of allergy. And finally, it is clear that all these events are a sort of stress. This means that also from the psychological perspective, you have to consider this point. And all these points can lead to different symptoms of different severity, maybe an increase of severity. And on the other hand, we have to consider that we can have the persistence of symptoms rather than the seasonality of symptoms in some cases. It's really a complex picture, but you have also mentioned that several mitigation strategies are on the table. And I believe that we have clearly to understood which could be the effect of this kind of mitigation strategies at patient level. For example, in one of your pictures, you have mentioned the face masks. It is clear that it is not feasible to wear every day of our life the face mask, but we have also to consider in a specific population which could be the effect of wearing a mask. I will ask to you, since we are in the context of a scientific society, we have to consider which kind of updating on knowledge or which kind of strategy our colleagues can implement in their daily practice in order to anticipate the problem. And which kind of knowledge we need to update? Allergy sensitization, different allergy in different areas of the world, mitigation strategy, different kind of treatment, different pattern of disease. Which is your opinion on this topic?
It's hard to describe in one hand because, for example, actually, the legislative effort by government to reduce atmospheric pollutants has been ongoing, but are full of challenge because of different opinion or economical or political priorities. It's the same way to the practitioners, like a health practitioner or medical doctors, because some of them say maybe the climate change is important to us, but maybe doesn't affect right now, maybe in 20 years, maybe use wearing the mask, the face mask is important, but maybe just for COVID, but not like a life routines. For example, in China, in 20 years ago, the people wear a mask, a face mask, for the pollutant reason. But in Europe, actually, maybe a few people wearing face masks. And when the people wearing a face mask is for COVID reason, not for a pollutant reason. It's the same in America. And
Guillermo, we have a question from Giovanni Viegi. You have partially answered to the question, but the question is, what are the main activities specialists can carry out to help a patient protecting themselves from air pollution and climate change health effect? At the patient level, what we can envisage?
But okay, for example, in these cases, we can recommend for the people to have exercise outdoors, wearing face masks when the pollutant level are higher in some region. We have a notice from the government when the pollutants are rising in several zones.
It is clear that maybe the electronic app can provide that a support.
Electronic diary application, something like that. So the news in the morning in some countries mention what is the level of the pollutants and the atmosphere in this moment, and is the pollutants are so high, maybe the recommendation is stay at home or stay and indoors. That's
sorry, Guillermo, but I have another couple of questions, tough question for you, coming from one from Eduardo Costa. Eduardo say, congrats for your presentation. How we can sensitize more people and the decision-making politics around the world with the more objective and palpable scientific data evidence? How we can achieve evidence?
We can actually we can reach a lot of evidence from that topic. For example, APA, American Academy Asthma and Allergy and Clinical Immunology, has a website just for this topic. European Academy has a topic for a web page for this topic, and also, for example, Interasthma has information about this topic. The Doctora Angelica Tutu from France published 2 or 3 years ago an important document about this finding.
Thank you, Guillermo. Since you mentioned the activity of our society, we are able to develop, but every support, every is welcome in developing survey also on this topic in order to collect the worldwide scientific opinion on which are the main issue that we have to consider in facing with the climate change and asthma. And I invite all of you to provide suggestions, and we will put in place a worldwide survey using our network. I have a last question for you that is not so easy. What is the major climate change trigger for hypercapnia in asthma patients?
Oh, it's an interesting question. Yeah, some pollutants are related with the hypercapnia. For example, ozone and NOx are related with the hypercapnia in patients with a previous COPD diagnostic and asthma too. And sulfur dioxide are related to hypercapnia. But all of them depend the time of the exposure, because if the exposure is very short, maybe you can see a physiological implies. But when the exposure is so long, for a long terms, we can see a different impliance in the physiological lung function and in the illness too. It's so difficult to say, if you exposure for 5 minutes, you can see these symptoms. And maybe it's not easy because depend on the geneticity, ethnicity, gender, age, etc.
Thank you, Guillermo. We are at the end of our webinar. It has been a pleasure to listen to your presentation. We will be back on this topic because it is really an hot topic. I would like to thank all the colleagues that are connected. I invite you to join us in the next webinar that we are planning for the next year. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Have a good Christmas.